Hello and welcome to Hood College. My name is Tanith Falacorsi. I'm Director of Graduate Admissions here at Hood. And on behalf of my admissions team, I want to say how excited we are to finally meet you in person after working with you for so many months via Zoom, email, and phone. We know you'll have a wonderful time while studying at Hood College. Please get involved and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We're here to help. Again, a very warm welcome to Hood. Hello, and welcome to the Cultural Awareness module. After viewing this module, you will be able to understand the importance of cultural diversity, appreciate the impact of cultural awareness, learn how to navigate the stages of cultural adjustment, discover the major concepts of cross-cultural awareness, and gain access to additional cultural awareness resources. So let's begin looking at the importance of cultural diversity. What is cultural diversity? It's the existence of a variety of cultural or ethnic groups within an environment. And cultural diversity is important because our country, our workplaces, our schools are increasingly consist of various cultural, racial, and ethnic groups. So you are surrounded with more diversity, whether you are living and working and studying in the United States or are traveling abroad. We can learn from one another, but first, it's very important to have a level of understanding about each other so that you can then facilitate collaboration and cooperation. So understanding of yourself and others is key, as well as an understanding of cultural diversity. So now let's look at the impact of cultural awareness. What does it do? It creates a richer and more creative environment because there's more different mind frames, there's a variety of thinking, and so that will naturally create a more diverse environment. It also helps individuals develop a broader sense of self and of other, and also an increased sense of empathy, which is the ability to relate to others and to differences. On the flip side, a lack of cultural awareness can definitely lead to misunderstandings and assumptions. So really, having a sense of cultural awareness means actively and regularly adjusting your expectations. So let's look at the stages of cultural adjustments. So cultural adjustments, it's a natural process that we all go through, whether you are starting a new job or studying at a new school like Hood College, or of course, if you are an international student studying in a foreign country. There's going to be several stages that you go through. And the first one is usually called the honeymoon phase. And that's the phase where everything is wonderful, everything is new, and everything has a little bit of a rosy shine to it. After the honeymoon phase, you tend to go into what's called the culture shock phase. And that's where you become aware of differences, aware of things not being what you're used to, or things operating differently than you're used to. And so that can cause a little discomfort and what's called culture shock. Usually after you go through culture shock, you reach a period of adjustments where you understand the differences a little bit better. You understand that not everything is great and rosy, but things are actually okay if they're different. And so that is a nice period of adjustment. And usually after that, if you leave that new environment to go back to a different environment or an older environment, let's say you're studying at Hood College and then you take a break and you go back maybe to your home or to a work environment or to a different country, you will experience what's called reentry shock. And that's usually where you have to, again, readjust to a different culture, a different way of doing things. And even if this way of doing things was familiar at some point, maybe now, after experiencing new things and new cultures, it's not as familiar. And usually there's also then at that point a period of adjustment. So that's why we call this period of cultural adjustments a W curve of adjustments, where you start off at the top at the honeymoon phase, you go down to the culture shock, you go back up to adjusting, you might experience some reentry shock, and then finally some additional adjustments. Now, keep in mind that these stages are never experienced in a truly linear fashion. So, a person might go directly into culture shock and completely skip the honeymoon phase. Or you might end up starting in a new place and adjusting right away. So, these stages are very variable and they do not work the same way for everyone. But by and large, cultural adjustment is a process that an individual will go through and be able to function effectively and live comfortably in a new environment, a place or an environment that's new and unfamiliar. So, living in a new culture or a new environment does require you to learn a new set of cultural patterns and behaviors. So, the W curve, which is illustrated on this slide, it's a predictable pattern of stages that we just discussed that occurs when a person experiences culture shock. And it's based on research that was done originally with students studying abroad. And again, if you look at this W curve of adjustments, you'll recognize the honeymoon phase, the culture shock, the adaptation, the reverse culture shock, the recovery, and then the reintegration. Another major concept of cross-cultural awareness is called the iceberg model of culture. And that is the concept that culture is often compared to an iceberg, which has both visible, which is on the surface, and invisible, below the surface parts. And failure to understand or recognize these parts of the culture, as well as how they influence each other, is the main reason why cross-cultural misunderstandings can occur. So if you look at this illustration of this cultural iceberg, you'll notice that the behaviors and practices part at the top is a very small part compared to all the other parts that are below the water. So perceptions and attitudes, beliefs and values, all those very strong belief systems are really not so obvious right away. And so that is something very important to keep in mind, is that when you experience a new culture, you might see what's at the top, the behaviors and the practices, but you have to go deeper in order to truly understand the culture, the environments, because a lot of what's underneath, which is the attitudes, the belief systems, the values, is often hidden and not quite so obvious right away. Another very important concept of cross-cultural awareness is the understanding of the differences between high context cultures and low context cultures. High context cultures are cultures that communicate in ways that are implicit and rely heavily on nonverbal communication. Another example is that high context cultures tend to be collectivists. They tend to value interpersonal relationships and have members that form stable and close relationships. So these are very close-knit communities, cultures, where in order to communicate and understand each other, you don't necessarily need to verbalize as much as some other cultures would. And that is very typical of what's called high context cultures. Low context cultures, by comparison, are cultures or environments that truly rely on direct, explicit, and precise verbal communication. Things tend to be a little bit more black and white, and there's a sense of personal space. High context cultures don't need as much personal space in general, whereas low context cultures will need more personal space. They are more individualistic and they value individual responsibility and action. So, of course, when you look at high context and low context cultures, you can view this in terms of actual countries and different cultural areas of the world. But you can also apply these concepts to a new environment because you might be going to a school that has a particular context that's maybe more high context than you're used to, or on the opposite, maybe more low context. So it's something very important to keep in mind and to be aware of to understand where you fit within that particular culture and adjust your expectations accordingly. So this graph here is a good representation of different countries that tend to fall on a range of low context going to high context. And you can see here that the United States, that America, is definitely more on the low context realm, as opposed to countries such as Spanish and Mexican and Arab countries, China and African countries. These countries tend to be on the higher range. So these are more high context cultures. And so when you are operating and functioning in a diverse society or environment, you must be aware that you'll have people in your environment that will probably relate to either a higher context culture or a lower context culture. And that will definitely affect the dynamics of your environment. So finally, here to finish, we have some additional cultural awareness resources that will be helpful for you to get additional information on what Hood has to offer you in terms of cultural diversity and awareness resources, as well as some outside resources. So if you are an international student or you're interested in the international student experience, Hood College has a wonderful website dedicated to international students that includes resources that are helpful to incoming international students. We've also included a document that tells you a little bit more about the W curve of adjustment. And again, that would be applicable to anyone that's functioning in a new environment. Another area that we have here for you are resources if you are part of the military community or interested in that particular community. Hood College has a wonderful website dedicated to the Hood military community with some wonderful internal and external resources on that webpage. So be sure to take advantage of that resource. We've also included an article that talks about the challenges of going back to school, going to college as a veteran or a member of the military community. And finally, we've included some resources on diversity and inclusion in the classroom. And that is something that would be of interest to all because regardless of which classes you'll be taking or what school you'll be going to, you will be in a diverse environment. So I will pause briefly here to give you a chance if you would like to take a screenshot of this slide or if you'd like to use your phone and take a photo so that you could keep these resources available to you. And I hope this was helpful, and we are very happy to welcome you to Hood College. Thank you so much.
Hello, welcome to Hood College Graduate School. My name is Ivana Shak and I'm an MBA student here at Hood. I just wanted to warmly welcome you to our community. I hope you know you made a great decision by becoming part of the MBA program. The program itself, all the professors, the students as well, and then the graduate school have been an immense help in developing my career. I hope the same will go for you and you have a wonderful, wonderful semesters ahead of you. Hope to see you around campus. Enjoy your Hood journey.